Do a review in the Sichas in Chelek Chavov. This is volume 26. We'll do the second Sicha for the Parshas Kisisa. The Sicha is a Rashi Sicha, and we're learning this Lilu Nishmas, B'neinu, Machmad, Einenu, Ahovenu, our beloved dear son, a shliach, dedicated, successful shliach of the Rebbe, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak, who was all of a sudden taken from us so suddenly, and we're learning the Sikha to benefit of his neshama, Teheinitz Shmosei Tzrura B'Tzreir HaChaim. The Sikha is a Rashi Sikha, but the Rebbe brings down various different Rashis, which talks about the anointment that was done with the Shemen HaMishcha, with the Shemen Zayis, as the Rebbe will bring down exactly how it was done, and the various different Rashis, and how do we explain all that? And there's different versions. The Rebbe goes through a very nitpicking, very looking into each Rashi exactly. The Rebbe actually says that the word ki that Rashi brings down, that it's can actually not mean the letter ki, but it's a Rosh Tevis of Chof Yevonis, and therefore that will sort of streamline most of the Rashis as the Rebbe goes on. But we have to go step by step, and there's a lot of very specific details in every Rashi, as we will see as we learn the Sikha. So we'll start in the beginning, Aleph. Von dem Posuk Mashachte boy es oyel moyed. So the Torah talks about in the Parshas Kisisa that they're going to make the special anointing oil. The anointing oil, the Torah talks about what exactly goes into this particular oil, and then what do you do with this oil? So the Pasuk says, "Mashachte boy es oyel moyed gomer," so that you should do the Meshicha. Meshicha means anoint. You smear with this anointing oil, you smear the oil moyed, the tent of meeting. That's the Mishka. Is Rashi mighty the Werter? So Rashi quotes the words from the Pasuk, Umashachto boy, that with the Shemen Zayis, with the Shemen HaMishcha, you should anoint. On his Mefarish, and Rashi explains, Kol HaMeshichas, all times when we do the Meshicha, the anointing, the smearing of the oil, is Kimin Chof Yevonis. It looks like a Greek, a Yovon Chof, the letter Chof in the Greek language has a shape. That smearing that we do is done like the letter Chov in the Greek language. And then Rashi adds, this is all the Meshichas. Chutz, Mishal Melochim, Shehen Kimin Nezer. With the exception, what is the shape of the Meshicha that you do for a king? When you anoint a king, you also use the Shemen HaMishcha. So over there, you don't make Chof Yevonis, but you make like a crown. Kimin Nezer, you anoint it differently. That's the Rashi on the pasuk. So now, what's the source of Rashi? The Moked for Rashi's Pirush, wegen the Oifane HaMeshicha. What's the source of Rashi's commentary about the different ways that there's different for the king and there's different for the other Meshichas? Is in Gemara Hayriyos and Krisis, is both in the Gemara Hayriyos and Krisis. And the Rebbe is going to bring later down both Gemaras, but right now the Rebbe brings down the Loshna Gemara in Hayriyos. The Rebbe is going to bring down in the answer also how the Gemara Krisis fits with this also. But for now, what is the language of the Gemara in Hayriyos is Moishchin as Hamelochim Kimin Nezer. So over there, the Gemara first talks about the Malachim. And it tells you how the Mashiach is done for Malachim. It has its own uh, case that kings are anointed, and you make in the shape of a crown. Ves HaKohanim, it says in the Gemara in Horayos, Yiru Kimin Ki. Like a key. What does it mean, like a key? Frag the Gemara, Mai Kimin Ki. What does it mean, like a key? Oben Abanashi Bargada says, Abanashi Bargada Kimin Chof Yivani. The meaning of the word key is the Chof Yivani, it's a Greek Chof. So that's what the Gemara said. So then let's compare what Rashi says to that which the Gemara says. So the Gemara doesn't talk about, the Gemara just says that the Malachim is Kimin Ki, and the Malachim is Kimin Nezer, and the Kahanim Kimin Ki. But Rashi, first of all, talks about Kol HaMashiachas, and Rashi talks about the Kol HaMashiachas before he talks about the Mashiachas Malachim. And he says Chutz Mishavla. In other words, in Rashi, the main subject is Kol HaMashiachas. And it says Chutz, but in the Gemara, it talks about the Mashiach of the Malachim, and then the Mashiach of the Kohanim. So let's look inside. Aber zusammen der Miet, but together with Rashi being sourced by the Gemara in Horayos, is Rashi b'pirushay mishane from Lashon HaGemara become a protim. Rashi in his commentary changes from the language of the Gemara in several details. Aleph, number one, Rashi zogt kol ha-meshiches. Says all anointments, nit nor meshichas koyanim ve'es state in Gemara. Not just the anointment of the koyanim. The Gemara, as the Gemara says, meshichas koyanim. Rashi says all meshichas. It's a change. Beis at his magdim kol meshichas far meshichas malachim. Rashi talks about first all the meshichas before he talks about what takes place, how the kings were anointed. And number three, Gimel, Nochmer, and even not only does he talk about all the meshichas before, Afilu Nochdem, even Rashi brings Rashi meshichas malachim. Rashi brings down the anointment of the king, nit als abobe din b'fnasra. It's not a case, it's not a stanza, a law by itself. There's a law of how all meshichas are done, and there's a law how the meshichas of the kings are done in its own case, its own stanza, its own halacha, being Gemara as the Gemara. Nor als prat hayoytze chutz min haklal. Rashi brings it down as a detail that comes out that this is exception of the rule from Kol HaMashiachas. All the Mashiachas are done in one way. The Mashiach of the Malachim, Chutz Mishal Malachim. There's an exception by the kings. But the Rebbe is going to explain this is very clearly understood why Rashi changes from the Gemara. But once we'll understand why Rashi changed the Gemara, it'll bring us to even a bigger question. In our Pasuk, in our Psukim, it doesn't talk about a king B'chlal. Why would we bring down, like in the Gemara, about the Meshichas Malachim? Because here we're talking about the anointment of the Mishkan. We're talking about the anointment of the Kohen, but we're not talking about kings over here. So Rashi can't say the anointments of the Kohanim, of the kings, because we're not talking about kings. Rashi says Chutz. Talk about all the anointment, with the exception of that anointment. The time for the Shinuim is moving with pashtus. So the reason for these changes is very simply understood. Rashi do ala Torah is noch mefarish pshuta shel mikra. Rashi here on the Torah is explaining the simple meaning of the verse. Und in the Pesukim and in the verses, redt sich wegen mehreren Beshichas. This Pasuk discusses various different, what they use, the Shem and Amishcha, various different things that they anointed as Beshichas HaMishkan, anointing of the Mishkan, Veha and the Oren, und the Kelim and the vessels, und Oich Meshichas Aaron Abaro, and also the anointing of Aaron and his sons. Aber wegen Meshichas Melochim Verdon Niedermont, the Pasuk does not mention here about anointing the kings. Und der River is Rashi Mefarish, so therefore Rashi says, Kol HaMeshichas, meaning there's a lot of Meshichas in this Pasuk. Wegen welche es redt sich in die Psukim, about which there is the discussion, these Psukim are dealing with that, is Kimin Kov Yevonis. Now, there is Chutz Mishal Melochim, the exception of the anointment of kings. Was steht nicht in the Psukim, that's not written in these Psukim. Shehem Kimin Ezer, so that's like a crown, that's different. But Rashi is mainly talking about what the Parsha is talking about, and talking about all of the different kinds of Meshichas that were done, how they were done, for the various different Meshichas, for the Kohen, the Mishkan, and the Oren, and the Kelim, and that's called. Rashi just adds, with the exception of the Meshicha for a king was done Nezer, that was done a crown, not like these key, like the coffee ones. So in that case, why does Rashi even have to mention the chutz? Since these psukim don't talk about them, Rashi explains the pshuta shel mikra. Frag the Rebbe, why does we even have to say it? If you zeblait or benit, according to this, still it remains not smooth. The idea that klal the Rashi ala Torah is what is Rashi's rule on the Torah that Rashi made is as is nitken sefer halacha. Rashi is not a book of laws telling us how meshichas are done just in general. Nor ani leibosi elo lepshuta shel mikra. I've come to explain only the simple meaning of the verse. Is farvos darf Rashi b'chlal meisiv zayin do. So why does Rashi at all need to add over here? We're not talking about halachas, how meshichas were done. We're explaining the psukim. That's what Rashi does. So why does Rashi say chutz mishal malachim, with the exception of the kings? The bald, as in their parsha, since in this portion, und euch in the psukim of parsha shelifnei zeh, not only here and also the verses and the portions before this parshas Kisisa umashachto vert klau nit der mond wegen meshichas malachim. It's not mentioned at all about the anointment of kings. We're not talking about it. So why does it actually have to bring down how the anointments of kings were done when there's no kings mentioned over here? So that's the first question that the Rebbe wants to understand. That why would Rashi even mention the Meshichas of the kings? And as we'll see later on, the Rebbe explains this represents to us what the Meshicha is trying to accomplish, this level of Kedusha, that it's not just a Meshicha, but that's how the king becomes a king, as we'll see later on at the end of the Sikha. Okay, so let's put that aside. Now we're going to details the different languages, how the Meshicha was done. So first, the Rebbe is going to quote from the different psukim, which Rashi already mentioned before. Base, Benegeya dem oifen ha-Meshicha, as it relates to how the anointment was done, the shape, the how they anointed. Rashi mefarish given in the parsha shelifnei zeh. Rashi already explained in the portion that preceded it, in the portion of Parshas Tetzaveh, come upon it several times. So over there, the pasuk talks about how the Kohanim were inaugurated and brought to become the Kahuna. So part of the procedure was that they took loaves of matzahs that were anointed with oil. So Rashi says, how were they anointed? From Posik, that this was the procedure in getting the Kohanim, that they had to bring these different korbanos. So they also brought these loaves of matzahs that were anointed with oil. So Rashi says, after they were baked, then you anointed them, you smeared them. And Rashi says, how? Kimin chof yivonis shehi asuya kinun shalonu. Says it is similar to a Greek chof, which is made in the shape, looks like our nun. A nun that we have is the same chof, the Greek chof. That's what Rashi explained it. So that's one Rashi in Parshas Tetzaveh telling us how the Rikike matzahs were shaped. It was done like a chof yivonis, like a nun. And we'll see. The Rebbe will take apart this why the kinun shalonu chof yivoni, what we need. We'll see as we learn on. But just for now, let's just see what the Rashi says, that it's made like a nun, and that's the Greek kof, and that's what they made on the rikike matzahs that were anointed with the oil. That's the shape. At the psukim nochdem, several verses after that pasuk of how they anointed the loaves of matzahs. Beim inyan for Meshichas Arin, over there we're already talking about how Arin, the Kohen Gadol, how he was anointed. So Rashi says, Af Meshicha Zu Kimin Ki. Now here it's abbreviated. Kimin Ki means Kimin Kof Yuvonis. You can say this is like the Kof Yuvonis. But Rashi says also this Meshicha too, just like the Meshicha by the loaves of matzah that you smeared them with oil were done like a Kof Yuvonis. Af Meshicha Zu is Kimin Ki, or Kimin Kof Yuvonis. And Rashi says, how was it exactly done? Noisin shemen al reishei ubein nerisei einov. He gives oil on top of the head and between the eyebrows. Umechabron betzboye, and he connects them from the oil of the head between the eyes. That's the key. That's the Kof Yuvonis. So that's the second time that Rashi brings down. And then now, in our posuk, the Noch, by posuk, later on over there, this is in Tetzaveh, when the posuk over there, when Meshichas HaMizbeach, Rashi says again, Zokt Rashi, V'chol HaMeshichas kimin chof yivonis. That all Meshichas were like the Greek chof, kimin chof yivonis. So in the Parshas Tetzaveh, there's 3 times Baderi Kikim, and by Meshichas Aaron, and by Meshichas HaMizbeach, where Rashi mentions about the way they did it to Chof Yivonis. Okay, so the Rebbe is going to explain now the different languages in the Rashi. The Tam Umokar Bepashta, the reason, what's the source? Simply Vos, Rashi Zokt, beim zweiten Posuk, wegen Meshichas Aaron. Why does Rashi say here, and the source, that by the zweiten Posuk, wegen Meshichas Aaron, so Rashi says, Af Meshicha Zu Kimin Ki. This Meshicha is also like a Kof Yivonis. Why does Rashi say also? Because technically these 2 Meshichas of the Rikikin and the Meshicha that was done to Aaron were different oils and for different purposes. And Rashi says, even though that this is a different Meshicha, still the style, the way was Kof Yivonis. Let me explain. Is Valdos Kum Behemshach zum frier dikum posik. The reason Rashi says af Mashiach zu, because this comes as a follow-up to the previous posik. But der Mashiach von der Kike Matzes, welchen is given azoi, that it was it follows the previous matzah. We were saying af Mashiach zu because we just learned about it. I went to jump ahead of myself, but first the Rebbe just explains why it says here af, because we just learned about Mashiach. So Rashi says af Mashiach zu. So how come in the third of the Vized after Verstehen? So Farvos is Rashi Mishane beim dritten Posik. So why does Rashi change in the third Posik? Wegen Mashiachas Mizbeach, when we talk about Neunte Mizbeach, und sagt a Klau. It doesn't say af, it doesn't say that, but it says a Klau. Chola Mashiachas, und nicht Pirush HaKosu. Why doesn't Rashi explain the verse? Af Mashiachas zu, Kmekov Yevonis, as it is just said with regards to Mashiachas Aaron, he should have said Af Mashiachas zu. The doimet to Mashiachas Aaron shalifnezeh. Just as Rashi said when we talked about the second pasuk, when we talked about Mashiachas Aaron, the pasuk said Af Mashiachas zu, so Rashi should have said similarly by the Mizbeach, by Mashiachas Mizbeach, instead of saying V'chol HaMashiachas, all the Mashiachas talking should have said Af Mashiachas zu. The doimet to Mashiachas Aaron shalifnezeh. And the Rebbe explains what the difference is, because the Mashiach that took place for the Mizbeach and by Aaron, but the Aaron comes first, is a different Mashiach than the Mashiach that took place in the pasuk beforehand of the Rikike Matzos. And therefore Rashi says Af. The Rikike Matzos was done with a different kind of an oil, and it had a different purpose. And therefore Rashi says Af Mashiach zu, but the Mashiach of the Kohen and the Mashiach of the Mizbech is the same Mashiach. There's no Af. Let's look aside. The Chayre, Yesh Leimar Achiluk. We can say the difference is Mashiachas Harakikin or Mashiachas Aaron, the smearing the oil on the loaves and anointing eyes, and it's very bazundere in Yone Mashiach Lagamri. There are two entirely different ideas in this Mashiach. The Mashiach from the Rikike Matzos, what did they use to do the Mashiach of the loaves of the Matzos? Is B'Shem and Zayis. That's with olive oil. When is a prat from the Asiyas carbon, that is a detail of making the carbon. Mashenke Mashiachas Aaron. So the way a carbon is made, and they use the olive oil for that, as opposed to Mashiachas Aaron, he used the Shemen HaMishcha. His Shemen HaMishcha, the anointing oil, the special combination that the Pasuk talks about from how they made the Shemen HaMishcha. So number one, it's a different oil, and it's a different purpose. That's a part of the carbon. Only is eine, but over here, Mashiachas Aaron is eine for the peulas to oiftom them v'kedash l'chayim. That is one of the acts which is to accomplish, to sanctify, and to make them to a kohen. So it's a different kind, a different purpose here. Nochmer, even more than that. The whole idea, it's not just that it's a different oil and it's a different detail, but it's more than that. That etzem move on from Mashiach, the understanding, the concept, the understanding of anointment is by Mashiachas Mishkan v'Kahanim u'Melachim. When we talk about anointing the Mishkan and the Kahanim and the kings, it's a different concept than the oil that's smearing on the loaves. Rashi is mefarish beparsha seinu, as Rashi explains in our parsha. as by Meshichas Mishkan v'Kahanim u'Melachim, when you anoint the Mishkan, the Kahanim and kings, is Meshicha meturgam loshen ribui gedulai. Meshicha is you make them great, you increase. Gedula, it's a raising of anointing, means you are raising them a level of anointment. But when you talk about the smearing of the loaves, is Loshen Aram is Bohem ki Loshen Ivris. Over there, it's the same. Aramaic Loshen is like the Ivris. It's not anymore Ribui. It's not the Targum of Ribui, but it's Meshicha. It's the same as the Pasuk says, which is to smear. There's a difference between anoint. Anoint means you're making them great, anointing somebody. And over here, and Meshicha by the Rikik means to smear. So it's a whole different concept of oil that's used there. So therefore, when we talk about the second one by Kohen, you're saying Af, even though it's different than the previous was a regular Meshicha, it wasn't with Hashem and Amishcha, it wasn't anointing, it was smearing. But there's two. What was the type? How did the shape of the smearing take place? It was Kiminki, Kiminkof Yivonis. Masha Enkin did Rita Meshicha Mekosu, but the third Meshicha can't say here Af. This is the same idea as the Meshichas from the Kohen. Masha Enkin did Rita Meshicha Mekosu, the Meshichas from Mizbeach, as the Meshichas from the Mizbeach, is not an andere Sug Meshicha, Meshichas Anish Lifnezeh. It's not a different category of Meshicha than Meshichas Anish Lifnezeh. They're also Meshicha anointment. You anoint the Kohen and you anoint the Mizbeach. The Meshicha, also the Meshicha from the Mizbeach, is Virashi, is Magdi, Virashi is introduces. B'Shemen HaMishcha, it's done with anointing oil. Uzi is Kidei Lekache, and it's made in order to, not just smearing on it, it is in order to sanctify it. It's the Loshen Ribui, it's a Loshen of Gedula, to the Kache. And that's why, and that's why Rashi specifically, when it comes to the Meshicha of Aaron, says, Af Meshicha Zuchu. Even this Meshicha, that Goshe, never Ribui Af. Why is he saying also this? Is Be'iker, is made not just because here we're talking about something else, but it's because it's another category. Is nicht weil do Retzich wegen Moshe sein, another Metzias, we're talking about smearing another entity. Before we were talking about the Rikikim, and now we're talking about the Kohen, so it's another entity. So this too, Aaron, nicht Rikikim, that now we're talking also Aaron, nor this is another sub Meshicha, Ligedula, this is another type. So even in this kind of Meshicha Ligedula, as nicht gucken, they give them, despite the fact that he is another sub Meshicha, it's another category of Meshicha, is Af Meshicha Zu Kmin Ki. This is also like a key, like a coffee bonus. But then when we talk about the Meshichas HaMizbeach that follows the Meshicha of the Kohen, was is von selben Sug for Meshichas Aaron, which is in the same category as the Meshichas Aaron, it's all the Gedula. Lekache, as Rashi brings down. The Mizbeach is Lekache, the Gedula. Darf Rashi nicht meistens sein, die Bavor nicht, Af Meshicha Zu. Then Rashi does not say also this, because this is the same as the previous one. The second and the third are in the same category, but in the second category, Rashi does say Af even though it's a different purpose and it's a different oil, it's a different type of Mashiach, but still the shape of it is done the same. But then the Rebbe wants to know that even when we talk about Mashiachas Rikikin, the Rebbe says that you see there's a difference between our Parsha. Here we're talking about the Rikikin to prepare them for the Korban, for the Kohanim. Over here, Rashi says, Bepashtus, it was done by Kiki, like Chav Yivonis. But then in the Parshas Vayikra, over there, Rashi brings down two Pirushim. One Pirush, it's like Kiki. When Rashi talks about Meshach, by a mincha, when you do the Rikikim, you also, says the Pasuk B'Shicha. And Rashi brings two opinions there. Actually, the first opinion says, that Rashi quotes over there, is that you keep on anointing oil until you finish. That means the Mashiach. But the second Pirush is that the Mashiach was done like a key. So how come here Rashi just says one pshat and there says two pshat? It seems a contradiction. Gimel. But therefore, we need to, however, understand l'chaira is Pirush Rashi b'negeya b'sicha Mashiachas rikikim matzis b'parshas Tetzaveh. Rashi's interpretation how the rikikim matzis were anointed in the Parshas Tetzaveh instead of to Pirush Rashi in Parshas Vayikra, it contradicts his interpretation, Rashi's commentary in the portion of Vayikra later on. In Parshas Tetzaveh, Zokt Rashi b'Pashtus, in the portion of Rashi says simply, as Meshichas Rikikim Matzis, how were these loaves of matzahs anointed? How were not anointed? How were they smeared? Koches is an understood Meshicha, even though it is a different category of smearing. He says, Ober in demselben Eufel mit dem Meshichas b'Shem LaMishcha. The way that they smeared it was the same as the anointment, the Shemen HaMishcha, which was an anointment. And the smearing of the Rikikim was the same. Rashi compared this. Bis as Oich, the Oifim for Meshichas Rashi, Meshichas Arim, to the extent that also when we talk about Arin's Meshicha, which is anointment, is Rashi. Arin's, is Rashi Medamet to Meshichas Rikikim. Rashi compares it to the smearing of the Rikikim, Af Meshichazu. Balderech Zeh, and similar to this, in our Parsha, is there the Noch Soisim. Rashi closes up and says, Stam, always, Kol HaMeshichas Kimin Kof Yivonis. All Meshichas Kof Yivonis. Since Rashi says all, was for Stimas Loshen Rashi, is mashma, because the Rashi doesn't just says it in a closed way, meaning all, it appears as mit kol ha-meshichas meinter kipshutim. So what does it mean with kol ha-meshichas? It means literally, al ha-meshichas. Anytime there is the meshicha. Akolponim welche mod gelernt bis until we had learned till now, which koilo meshichas rikikematzis, which would include the Meshicha, the Kika Matz in the Parshas Tetzaveh, in the korban that they prepared for the Kohen. And Rashi seems to say, in this Rashi, that it's always done in a way of a key, a kof yuvanis. That's what seems in Rashi. In our Rashi as well, in the Rashi Kisisa. Oh, but in Parshas Vayikra, but then when we come to Parshas Vayikra, Barikika Matzah Meshuchim Bashemen, for Korban Mincha, we're just talking about a Korban Mincha, and together with the Korban Mincha, they brought these loaves of matzahs which were smeared with oil. For Korban bringt Rashi zwei days in Oifen HaMeshicha. Rashi brings two opinions how they smeared it. Yeshem Moshcham v'Chayzer u'Moshcham. You keep on smearing them and smearing them again. Until the entire oil that was in the loig of shemen was consumed. They got all the oil out on top of these Rekike matzahs. But v'yesh emrim moishchein kimin kof yivonis. But others say that the way the Mashiach is done is like a kof yivonis. There's haste. That means as loit ein deya rishayna in Pirush Rashi, which means like in one opinion, which is the first in the Rashi Vayikra, is oifun meshichas harikikin, is the way they smeared these loaves, zaindik and under sug meshicha, because they're talking another category of meshicha, because they weren't to raise them, weren't anointing, it was a smearing. They're not like the other smearings or the anointment. Shemen HaMishcha was anointment, they raised them. Nitvi in Parsha, but this is contradicts in Parsha Tetzaveh, or Rashi Soisa Ve'in Deya, that Rashi only says and closes up and gives no other opinions, just like the Deya that it was Kimin Chof Yivonis. So why is Rashi over here contradicting himself and brings two opinions how the Mashiach was done? Yes, the Rebbe will explain that this Mashiach later on is just a regular mincha, has nothing to do with the kahuna. The Rebbe will explain the idea of kohen, as we will see as we go on. So in Oizdala, the Rebbe, to explain this, is going to go into the details of the Rashi over here, about the Chlal Rashi telling us what it looks like. What does it matter to Rashi and the Pshat to tell us what it looks like in the different places, as they seem to be different versions? Dalet, but das verstehen behagdim shaila hanal. So we'll understand all this by first introducing the above question, Benegeya, as it relates to alle Pirush Rashi Hanal, to all Rashi's commentaries. Pirush Rashi ala Torah is doch nit kein Sefer Halachas. Rashi's commentary on the Torah is not a book of laws. Is nit glatik, so it's not smooth. Lemainaf kiminer b'pshuta shamikra. What difference does it make in the simple meaning of the verse? In welchen Eufens is given the Mashiach, how the Mashiach took place. And even if you're going to say Atam, even if you find a reason why it's necessary for Rashi to explain the 5-year-old who's learning Chumash, them Oifen HaMashiach, the style, the way to do the Mashiach, is Klal nit move on. So it's at all not understood. For vos Rashi darf meidich sein. Why does he have to go into the great length and write that this is kimin kof yivonis, telling us it's like a Greek kof, and then he explains shehi asuyo kinun shalonu, which is made like our nun. Unzok nit bikitzer, doesn't say bikitzer. As the Mashiach is azoiva nun shalonu, it's like our nun. What do we need to know the kof of the Greek, which is like our nun? He should say what it looks like. It looks like our nun. Something about kof yivonis over here, Rashi is telling us, as Rebbe will explain. Nochmer. In the Vaite Diki Pirushim, in the later on Pirushim, after the first time in Parshas Tetzaveh, Rashi Chazet even them Tziyur HaMashiach, when Rashi repeats the shape, the way it was did the Mashiach, the way the smearing, the anointment was done. Nutzter alamol dem loshen. He always used loshen kibin kof yivonis, like the Greek kof, nit der monadika dosis kinun shalonu, without mentioning it's our nun. First of all, he should only say our nun, but Rashi makes sure every time to say kof yivonis. Is tamua. So this is surprising. Let's assume that Rashi has to tell us that this is like a kof yivonis. Aber nachdem wir hat schon das einmal gelost wissen, but once he already told us, he let us know what the Greek, what the key is doch maximum established, that would be fitting and it's logical. As beim weiterdicken mit Zeir sein Öfen HaMashiach, when he continues to describe, to shape the way the anointment works, soll der nutzen the maskana. He should use this conclusion. We did suras nun, that it's a shape of a nun. Wow, just bringing down. Rashi brings down nor, only brings down the Chof Yevonis. Ubefrat as dafke sie is verstandig, specifically that only a nun, our nun is understood, klor, by Memchamesh Lemikra. This is clear by the 5-year-old who's learning Chumash. Ulepoil, but actually, what does Rashi do? Is Rashi Moisim blows the Mershte Mo as his Kinun Shalom. Only the first time Rashi adds, it's like our nun. Oder noch bechol pam zokter nor, then every time he says, Kimin Chof Yevonis, keeps on saying Kimin Chof Yevonis. Why would Rashi insist on always bringing Chof Yevonis? And first of all, he should have just said nun. And even if he does say Chof Yevonis, but the first time tell us the Chof Yevonis like a nun, and then he should say nun. But Rashi seems like there's something about the Chof Yevonis. And now the Rebbe is going to spend a few minutes explaining really what is the version in Rashi, in the Rashi. It seems like also the Rashi's key Chof Yevonis not consistent. That the Zayin verstandig la'achre habiru bir v'abiru. So this will be understood after explaining and sorting out in the Girsa Nechoina from the Werter, Benegeya Chof Yevonis, the correct version of these words as it is relates to Chof Yevonis bepirush Rashi in Rashi. In Mesechta Krisus, so before the Rebbe quoted Mesechta Horiyos, he said that in Mesechta Krisus also, the Gabi Meshichas Kahanim, over there it talks about the Meshichas Kahanim is the Loshen HaGamoreh Kimin Ki, like Ki. And then it says Kimin Ki Yevoni. It's like a Ki Yevoni. Doesn't say Chof. It says like a Ki Yevoni. In Mesechta Horiyos is the Girsa in the Gemaras Shabiyadenu, the version in our Gemaras, Kenal Sif Aleph, over there, like we mentioned before in the Sif Aleph, Kimin Chof Yevoni. At Ki Yevoni, but Chof Yevoni, a Greek Chof. In Ksav Yad from Mesechta Horiyos, but in the written version in Mesechta Horiyos is the Girsa Ki Yevoni. So in Horiyos, it's Ki Yevoni via Mesechta Krisis, like it says in not Chof Yevonis, but Ki Yevoni, like in Mesechta Krisis. And in Mesechta Menoches, like Abba Meshichas Rikikin, and in Mesechta with regards to the Rikikin, in der Mishnah steht Kimin Ki. Und the Gemara is the Reif Mefarish Kimin Ki Yevoni. So while in Mesechta Horiyos says clearly Chof Yevoni in our Gemaras, but in the Ksav Yad it says Ki, like in Krisus. So the version seems like to be Ki, like the Gemara in Horiyos says Ki Yevoni. And Mesechta Menachos, it says very clearly, state Kimin Ki. And the Gemara is Mefarish Kimin Ki Yevoni. So in all the Gemaras, basically, besides Mesechta Horiyos in our Girsa, it says Chof Yevoni, but if you look, it's always Kimin Ki, Chof and the Yud together. That's in the Gemara. What about in Rashi? In Pirush Rashi ala Torah, give hitman kama v'kama neschois. We also find various different versions in Rashi's commentary on the Torah. In the Pirush Rashi for the Gedrukte Chumoshim, in the Rashi's commentaries and the printed Chumoshim, is beim ersten und dritten Pirush Anal shebe Parshat Tetzaveh, in the first and third Rashi commentary in the Parshat Tetzaveh, und auch be Parshat Seinu, und in Parshat Vayikra, all the parshas and also in our parsha and also in the portion of Yikra, steht Kimin Kof Yivonis. It says Kof Yivonis. Und beim zweiten Pirush, bei Meshichas Aaron, by the second by Meshichas Aaron is the Loshen, meaning that the second commentary of Rashi, meaning after the first one, is with regards to the Rikikim, the Meshuchim Bashana, the Rikikim. The second, which was talking about the anointment of Aaron, is so by that in that Rashi, that's the second Rashi, the second Pirush, which mentions the style of the Meshicha, is the Loshen Kimin Ki. Over there it says Loshen Ki. And Ki over here is Kof with a Gershaim as abbreviation. Aber in the Kisvi Yad from Pirush Rashi, while that saying the Fus Rishon Mishenik, but in the handwrite, Rashi's handwrite, and the same thing in the first and second print, Zayin Faran, Kama V'Kama Shinuim, there are many differences. Uberubam Sheraisi, and in most of them that I saw is the Girs in Unzer Parsha, the version in our portion, on the Let's Say Prush Manal, Shebe Parsha Tetzavon, in Parsha V'Yikra, and the later two, in the Parsha also it says Kimin Ki, not the Kof Yivonis, but it says Kimin Ki. So in Rashi itself, in our printed version, the only time that it says Kimin Ki is in the second Parsha. But in the handwriting, the Rebbe says, in most of them, it's always, it says also Kimin Ki. Und in dem ersten Pirush Analysis of Parsha Tetzaveh, Kimin Ki Yivonis. Over here it says, in the first one, my only time that it says, and then Akoponim Kivikiva, aber in Kama Kisu Yad wird noch abgeteilt Pirush Kimin Ki Kof Yivonis. So by us in the Rashi, so the Rebbe says that in the first one it says the Gedug is beim ersten und dritten Pirush now steht Kimin Kof Yivonis by the first and third. Only by the second one it says Ki. But in this Ksaviyad, also in the first Rashi it says Kimin Ki Yivonis. Aber in Kamo, Kisviyad wird noch abgeteilt Pirush Kimin Kof Yivonis. The Melanim Bepashtus is the Kavone in Pirush Rashi Kimin Ki. So you know what is the meaning like the Ki? What does it mean when it says Ki? And with the Gersh's Ki is Punkt the Gemara. At the main the Gemara Gufa Taj the Sob the Nochab, when the Gemara itself translated Kimin Ki Yivoni. With their ois Ki in Loshen Yoven. It's like the letter Ki in the Greek. That means when it says Kimin Ki, meaning the Ki Yivoni. But if you say Tzorech Godel, so but we need, according to this, we need to understand like the Meroim Neschois B'Ksav now, Kimin Ki. So why would it say Kimin Ki when the Gemara itself has to translate what does Ki mean? That it's a Greek letter of Ki. But they just say in all these Ksaviyat, it just says Kimin Ki, and we're supposed to know what this Ki is. Ma doch has the Gemara banugen sich nit mit Zogen Stam Kimin Ki. Just for sure, the Gemara doesn't say just Kimin Ki. Und teich da b'chol moker was es meant Kimin Ki. The Gemara always translates Kimin Ki means a coffee Ki Voni. Is doch achas kam v'kam is not for sure. As Rashi b'pirush ala Torah. Rashi's commented the Torah was his Farah ben Chomish Lemikra, which is for a 5-year-old learning Chomish. Vet nit soisim seine Zogen blois Kimin Ki. Rashi's not going to say just Ki, but I'll tell you what Ki means. So the Rebbe brought down all these Ksaviyad and Rashi and all these places where it says Kimin Ki, and it doesn't say that it's a Chav Yivonis. Sometimes it says Chav Yivonis, but the Rebbe says in the Kisvei Yad, it doesn't say Chav Yivonis, it says Kimiki. Bedeuche Kleimer, as Rashi verlost sich in the alle Erten, sagt Kimiki, that Rashi relies on all the papers, says Kimiki, all the places, that it says Kimiki, if them was at Mefarish, when the ersten Mol, Rashi explained the first time, and this meant Kimiki Yivonis, so Asuyo Kinun Shalonu. Over there, Rashi explained the key means a key Yivonis, which is made like our nun, and that's why Rashi just says Kimin key without telling you what it is. Now, revolt in jeden or zugelegt the main word Yivonis. He would add the word key. The Rebbe is trying to prove that the word key doesn't mean key, it's an abbreviation of Kof Yivonis. It doesn't make sense for Rashi to just say key, and then we have to figure out that it's a key Yivonis. The Rebbe is trying to say that the key itself is a Rosh Tevis. Wherever it says Kimin Ki, it's an abbreviation of Kof Yivonis. It's not a separate key, and then we have to interpret that it's a Kof Yivonis. So Rashi should have said add, if Rashi meant just key, Rashi said add one more word, Ki Yivonis. So Klor Machados is an Ois Beloshen Yivoni, to make it clear that it's a Greek letter. So therefore, the Rebbe says Velochein. So the Rebbe says wherever it says ki in the Ksav Yad, it always means ki Yivonis. Therefore, it appears to say, as in the Erter Umegefintim Pirush Rashi ala Torah, that in those places where Rashi in commentary of the Torah you find the Girsa Kimin Ki, is the word ki. So the word ki nit kein hetek v'losh na Gemara. The Gemara says ki, and then the Gemara explains my ki that it's ki yivonis. Und das meint an ois b'shem ki. This is not quoting the Gemara the letter ki, which is the letter ki, as the Gemara, and then we need to explain that das is a Rosh Tevis. It's an abbreviation. Und es darf stehen ki b'tfusim shalonu, and it has it like in our print kimin ki, a chof and a yud and a Pashra, Gershayim, Mitasim and Gershayim, the Rosh Tevis, to mean that this is a abbreviation. Ki abbreviated Ki Yivonis, the Hainu, Chav Yivonis, not Ki Yivonis, or Chav Yivonis. There is Mefarish in the Ershtim Pirush Meparshas Tetzaveh. Rashi explains in the very first Parshas Tetzaveh that its Ki is Chav Yivonis, and that's what it stands for. Ki Chav Yivonis. So the Rebbe says sometimes they use the Gershayim also to emphasize that that is a name of a letter. It's the word ki. That's why it has not ki because as a part of a sentence, a part of a discussion, but a ki, it's a letter in itself. But the Rebbe says no, ki is abbreviation of Chav Yivonis. Pashtus is not known. Simply, people assume as the Gershayim of word ki, that the Gershayim on the word ki is to mitzayin sein, that is to point to this is a nomen for anois. This is a name of a letter. It's called ki, not because, but it's a letter of Rapi now. But based on the above, and by introducing Rashi is not coming to close it up or to interpret. Is nira loymar. The Rebbe says it seems to me to say as the Gershayim sign in bepashtet, that these Gershayim that are between, it's abbreviation. Asimen shel Rosh Tevis, it's a sign of Rosh Tevis Genau. Und leut dem verdient man euch, and that way, what we also benefit from this interpretation that ki means Kof Yivoni, so then you end up gaining from this as man darf nit marbe sein in die Shinuye nechschois v'toosei. The difference of the versions and the mistakes I'm thinking that the people that printed Chulu, as in verfelt, either they missed out or the Tzui the Vort Yivoni, they missed or they added. oder an anstatt a pay surface, or instead of a Endfei, a Langenfei, gestellt a Yud. So the word ki is there should have been chofei for the letter chof, kimin chof, and you're saying instead of they said a yud instead of a fei, ki b'mokim chof, the word ki b'mokim chof. You don't have to say that just because ki is a Rosh Tevis, chof yivonis. So, anyways, there's a lot of the details over here, but basically, just to take what the Rebbe is telling us over here, that in all the Rashis where it says ki does not mean the letter ki in the Greek, but its abbreviation, it stands for Hafrivanis. And now the Rebbe is going to go on to explain also the rest of the Rashis, as the Rebbe will continue now in Oizvot. So, based on the Rebbe's explanation, the Rebbe continues now in Oizvot that Rashi is always mentioning the letter Chof. Kimin Chof, it is like the letter of the Chof Yuvonis. Not a Ki Yuvonis, but a Chof Yuvonis. Why is Rashi mentioning a Chof? The Rebbe brings from the Barbanel that the name Kohen starts with a Chof. And the Rebbe will continue in the same thing, even though the Meshichas, the Mizbeach, the other is also Chof Yuvonis, and that's not with a Kohen, but it's Kahuna. And the Rebbe will explain. Very interesting. Based on the Barbanel and based on the Rebbe explained now that the Rashi is always saying the letter Chof. Vov al pizeh as Rashi zog b'chol pam. Chof Yuvonis, Rashi each time says Chof Yuvonis. That is the meaning of the word ki. Yesh leimar, we can say as the kavona for Rashi mit kimin kimin Chof Yuvonis, that it's like a Chof Yuvonis is need to metayr sein dem tziyur ha'is. Rashi doesn't come here to describe the shape, that it's like a shape of a Chof Yuvonis. The majority of the people doesn't know the language, so how are they going to know what the Chof Yuvonis looks like? Nor as the Tziur v'Eifenat Meshicha hat a Sheiches mit Ois Chof Shalonu. It's a Chof Yuvonis to tell us it's the Greek Chof, but it's our connection to our Chof. What is the connection? The Birbazeh. The Barbanel is Mevayer. The Barbanel explains the Tam. What is the reason? What is the reason? Was the Meshicha von Aaron is Kimin Chof Yivonis? Why is it take like a Greek Chof? Adosis Barames, this hints to us, Shahu Asher Bochar Hashem Lekahin, that he is the one that Hashem chose to be the serving him. Because the Chof is the first of the letters Kohen. Yesh Loimar, the Rebbe says, Oich Rashi Nemton, also Rashi accepts. Adrabe, Frir Bisman, Rashi is even before the Barbanel. As their Tam was Meshicha is Kimin Chof Yivonis. The reason why the smearing has the Chof Yivonis, why did we make it like a Greek Chof? Is weil Chof is the erster Ois from word Kohen. Chof is the first letter of the word Kohen. Was is nit King Kashi and all. This is kind of seems like almost stretching it. The problems we would have by saying that Chof is the letter Kohen is vi shaykh to zogim shutishal mikra. How could we see in the simple meaning of the verse? Aleph, number one, as Rashi is Olmeinena Inya for Rosh Tevis. Rashi says the Chof is as it's the beginning of the letter of Kohen. Beis unoch ba'ifnas the Rosh Tevis. And what kind of a Rosh Tevis? The erster ois von Loshen Kodesh dikum Wort. And the first letter of the word Kohen, Rashi means the Chof. But a kumskor b'tzoros ois in Lashon Yavonis. But what is the shape of the letter Chaf? That's the shape of the way it's in the Greek language, because that's the Chaf Yavonis. The Chaf is the Kohen, but it's a Chaf Yavonis. It's from the, so we're saying that that's stretching it. The number three, the ganzen Linie sagt Rashi nicht befehlisch. Rashi doesn't even tell us this whole thing explicitly, but if verlost sich hat es allein verstehen, he realizes the person will understand it by himself. He calls it Chaf Yivonis, and he means the Kohen, and he means from coming from the Greek language, and this is all understood by itself. Rashi is relying that they are get it by learning. The Rebbe said that's not a problem. Well, Rashi in Friedens and Pirush Parshas Breishis, because Rashi had already in his commentary in the portion of Breishis he lost Wissen. He let us know as Oich Bepshute Shal Mikra Benutzich the Torah Midrashi Tevis, that also in the simple meaning of the pasuk we say that this is not something using the beginning of a word. We can use Rashi Tevis. Rashi Taichdor the word Shamayim. Rashi translates the word Shamayim. With Kama Farshina Rashi Tevis, there's various types of Rashi Tevis. So Mayim, Shom Mayim, Eishamayim, carry waters, there's water, fire water, all part of Shamayim is a Rashi Tevis. So we see that Rashi Tevis is something which the acceptable in Pshuta Shamikra. When that is just Mefarish in Pshuta Shamikra, he explains this in the simple meaning of the verse. Nit behagdoma dozaina medrash agode. It doesn't even introduce, well, this is a medrash agodic interpretation. No, Rashi just brings it down. Basement showing, so already we know as an ois can mean on the Rashi Tevis. We know that a letter can mean the beginning of a word. Rashi Tevis, so Chav can mean koyin. Rashi zogt an inyan was is verbunden mit an ois. So when Rashi mentions something which is associated, tied to a letter, versteht man that das can sein, and this is possible. So you understand that this could be, das ist verbunden mit Rosh Tevis, that it's connected to Rosh Tevis. And the issue that even though it's a letter of the Greek language, it's also not difficult at all, as Torah is also Batzi and so on Ois, was is nicht von Lashon HaKodesh, that the Torah should be referring to a letter which is not Lashon Kodesh. But also chain Rashi learned. Rashi learned this already before, that the Chumash we have not Lashon Kodesh. The word ule toitofa is beininach by the tefillin. Rashi says, it's Rashi mefarish tat bekatvi shtaim. In the place of katvi, the word tat from toitofas means two, and pat toitfos be'afriki shtaim also means two. Two and two is four. Now the four batim toitofas beininach. Das heißt, as Torah rufton tefillin mit a nomen word. The Torah refers to the tefillin with a name and with a word. Doch ist neivgestalt geworden, was ist neivgestalt von Werte von zwei andere Lashonos, which is connected, put together from words from two different languages. So it's not such a terrible thing. So we can assume that. So therefore, it's okay. The problem, however, the Rebbe explains that the Kof Yuvonis Rashi keeps on mentioning is to represent the Kohen, because that's why the Chof. But what about the other anointment, which is not for the Kohen, the Meshichas Mishkan, the Caleb, or Meshichas Rikikim, Zion. It seems like this explanation is not really correct. But Rashi Zoktov than Pirush, Rashi says the interpretation as Meshicha is Kimin Chof Yivon, is this interpretation that it's a Greek Chof, nor by Meshichas Aaron, not just by Aaron, who's a Kohen. But by Meshichas Mishkan v'Kaleb, also when you anointed the Mishkan and the Kaleb. Unochmer, even more than not only also there, the Ersten Mol, where Rashi Zoktas, the first time Rashi says it is God by Meshichas Rikikin, is when they smear those Rikikin out. Umay Meshichas An Zokt Rashi dem Loshen, and when it comes to the smearing, the anointment of Aaron, Rashi says the Loshen Canal, Rashi says Af. Also, in addition, Mashiach Zukimin Kaf Yivonis, that this is also like a Yivon. Is vi kemen lernen in Pirush Rashi. So how are we able to learn in Rashi's commentary as mit Zogen, as the Mashiach is kemen Kaf Yivonis, where Rashi says by the Mashiach of the Mizbeach, uh, Mashiach Rikikin. How can we say that Mashiach Rikikin is the Kof is a Kohen? Is a Kavanos, also the Shtevis Kohen, wie bald das mit Mekoimis Elu, redt sich nicht wegen Kohen. In these places, it's not talk about a Kohen. So how could we say that the Chof is hinting for the Kohen? So so the Rebbe said what we can say, as the mitvos Rashi zog by the alle Meshiches, as is eine kim in Chof Yivonis. The fact that Rashi says that everything is like Chof Yivonis, there is noch Matgish b'Pirusha b'Parshat b'Tzave, when Azor b'Parshat Seinu, as Rashi emphasizes in the portion of the Tzave, also known, Kol HaMeshichas kim in Chof Yivonis, is Kavanosi lahashmeinu. So what he intends to teach us, as the Geder HaMeshicha in the Aleph Fallen, that the definition of Meshicha in all cases is verbunden mit den Inyan HaKahuna. It's Kohen, not Chof stands for Kahuna, not for the Kohen, but for Kahuna, nit mit HaKohen. That's why Rashi, then it's still this first letter, but it's a letter which is associated with the letter of Kahuna. And the Rebbe explains, because when we talk about the Rikiki Matzis, that's what to do with the Kahuna. That's how he was anointed, became a Kohen. The Mizbeach and everything was for the purpose of Kahuna. The Rebbe will explain now. Has the beer in them, the explanation. The Rikiki Matzis in the Parshas Tetzaveh, the loaves of the matzahs that you anointed, that you smeared on in the Parshas Tetzaveh, Zayin from Korbanos HaMiluyim. They were part of the sacrifices over the inauguration. What is the purpose of those of the inauguration? And this is what you should do for them. How do you inaugurate the Kohanim? How do you sanctify them to become Kohanim for me? Take the bread, all the different korbanos, so the loaves of the matzahs, which smeared with oil, is the process to lekadosh oisem lechayim. As dur the korbanos hamiluyim, through the sacrifice of miluyim, nismalu yideyim from Aaron. So their hands were filled, they were inaugurated, they became holy for kuna. Und der Fahr is Rashi Madgish. That's what Rashi emphasizes. The Mashiach, so the Kiki is given, Kimin Kof Yuvonis, was a Kof Yuvonis, while they're gathered for their Mashiach, because what's the definition of this anointment is Al Saniyan Shal Meluyim. This is part of the inauguration, filling their hand, was to toif, Lekadish Oisum Lechayinli, to sanctify, to be a kohen to me. So Rashi said that is actually the Mashiachas of the king is in the process of making him kuna. Those hays the Mashiachas and the king da miluyim. That means when you smear the kicking of the miluyim, isn't it lois eine from the asiyas? It's not just one of the actions. It was great to the kicking matzahs that prepares the loaves of matzahs to venerate the korban so they can be fit for a korban canal sea base. No, nor the Mashiach Gufi is a chelik. That anoint, that's what I say, that all Mashiachas are Chof Yivonis. That's also is a chelik from Inyan HaMiluyim. This is part of the inauguration. That fills them. That's the idea of filling, for spoil them. It impacts to make them holy to become kohen. Now, der mit is verstanden be Pashtus, was Rashi be Pashtus Tetzaveh is soisem ki hadeyo. In the Pashtus Rashi says like the opinion as the Kike Matzis hat men Meisher gewen kimin Chof Yivonis, like a Chof Yivonis, because over there it has to do with Kuna. Mas enki the Pashtus Vayikra bringt 2 days because over there we're talking about Mincha. Weil Pipschuta shall mikra sein, das zwei besondere Unionen. There's two separate yonim, the Meluyim, the Rekike Matzes, and the Rekike Matzes that is talking about in Vayikra is two separate yonim. Parshas Tzave v'uas retzich wegen the Meluyim. In the portion of Tzave, which the discussion we're discussing, they brought the Rekikim as part of the inauguration. Is euch the Meshichas Rekikim. Atel from the Meluyim over there, the smearing of the Rekikim that becomes a part of the idea of to fill their hands of the preparation was to toiv kedushas kahunas Aaron. And now this accomplishes the sanctity of the kahuna of Aaron. Ubemele is the Mashiach in Chof Yevonis. That's why there has to be like a Chof Yevonis. Masha enke be parshas Vayikra, but in the portion as opposed to portion Vayikra, was like Akor Mincha, my Fitan, over there we're talking about a mincha offering, which is baked in the oven. Hotos kin shaykhs nit zu in a kahuna. It's nothing doesn't have a connection to kahuna. Nor stama prati ma'isa korban, so dit in the korban. The riber is in pshuta shemikra do and is in a smokum. That's why in the simple meaning, in the pshuta shemikra, there is room for both opinions. Well, noch mashkulim him, they're both equal. You can say both opinions. Because here it's not part of the preparation of the kahuna, which is in the portion of the tzava of the rekikim b'shuchim b'shemer. Over there, it's davke kahuna. So the Rebbe explains here the chof is not present koyin, but it presents kahuna. And in Parshas Tetzaveh, even the rekikim are part of the preparation. They make up the kedusha of the koyin through this process. So therefore, it's made kimin chof because it's the level of kahuna. Mashenken in the Parshas Vayikra, Lav Davke, it's talking about the mincha, and the mincha has nothing to do specifically with the kohen. It's just a part of the process of the korban mincha. Oistes, as bleibt aber nicht glattig, but it still remains not smooth, benegeya meshichas mishkon v'kedov. We explained the rekikim, we explained the meshichas of the kohen, but what about the mishkan and the kelov? What kind of a special connection haben die meshichas? Do these smearings that were done durch Rosh Tevis Chof Yevonis Canal to kohen? What did they have to do to the Chof Yevonis to the kohen? So it doesn't seem like, so here we're saying it's all about the Chof, it's all about the kohen. But what are the Dimshichas Mishkan V'Kelo? Yesh lahasbir bazeh. We can explain, like Rashi, is the Chof Yevonis, according to Rashi, the Chof Yevonis, the Reish HaTeva, nit davke from word kohen, al shem hatoyer. It's not just the word kohen in the descriptive, was what tzitzit lois tza'arin ubonov, which only refers to Aaron and his sons. This is mashma from Pashtus Loshen Abarbanel, which appears from the simple language of the Abarbanel, nor kinau, will close the convert kahuna. But like we said before, it's generally about the kahuna. Not kohen, but kahuna. The shaders from kahuna, the service of kahuna, das heißt, which means as euch b'shichas Aaron ubonov, also the anointment of Aaron ubonov, is in yono. What's the idea of that meshicha? Nit nor as they werden der mit kohanim. It's not just that they become kohanim, nor beloshen haposik v'kidashta oisam lechahen li, to serve me, sanctified them so they become servants of Hashem, to serve me, so they can do the service. As the Meshicha to oiv the kedusha, that Meshicha accomplishes that sanctity, welche bringt sie herein in their serora, in that dominance, v'shedus and service, v'avodah and work for kahuna, from the kahuna. V'alpizei is move on the shaychas for Meshichas Mishkan v'kelov to Chof Yevonis. Based on this, we understand the connection of smearing the Mishkan and the Kelov to the Chav Yivonis, Rosh Tevis Kohen Kahuna. Start with Kohen Kashem, V'Mishichas Arim Nubono. Just as the smearing, the anointment of Arim Nubono, V'Zeh Mekadosh Yeveren Royal L'Shem Avodah, sanctifies them so they become fit to serve and to do the work. In the Beis Hamikdash, Azoyich B'Negeya to Mishkan V'Kelov, the same thing is as it relates to the Mishkan's vessels. The Meshicha from Mishkan V'Kelov, when you smear the oil, you anointed the Mishkan V'Kelov, Hot Oivgiton, in Zeya Kedusha, it accomplished a sanctity, V'Chamacht Zeiroi, which makes them fit as Mizol in Umitzei Ton Davei V'Shirus, that in them and with them to do the work and the service. So this is part of the kahuna of the preparation, the kahuna, not kohen, the kahuna, the preparation, anointing the Mishkan brings them to that level of kedusha that the Aveda is done with and through them. Yud. Apikol anal is verstandig lo Rashi b'Parshat Seino. Now we'll understand the language of Rashi in our parsha. Kol ha-meshiches kimin chof yibonis. All the anointments is like a chof yibonis. Chutz mishal malachim shem kimin nezer, with the exception of the malachim, which is like a crown. Those was Rashi zog klal kol ha-meshiches kimin chof yibonis. What Rashi says, all meshiches are chof yibonis. Chochas pirush Rashi la Torah. Is nitkin sefer halachas. It's not a book of halachas to tell you what meshichas are. Is valdemit is mudgush umuvan, because by Rashi saying that it's emphasized and it's understood. Be'azoy der shemen hamishcha, that explains how the anointing oil is shemen mishchas kodesh. Yeah, it's an oil, anointing oil, a holy it should be. As the meshicha tut oif dem iyan hakedusha. That Meshicha, this accomplishes, makes up the Kedusha. Buzetmen adosis der Geder von Shemen HaMishcha. Where do we find, how do we see that this is the definition of Shemen HaMishcha that brings Kedusha? So Rashi, Kol HaMeshichas, all the anointment for Shemen HaMishcha is Kimin Chof Yivonis, is like Chof Yivonis, was weist Kinal, which shows, as we said earlier, as does tut oif the kedusha tzuveneroi l'sheidus kuhuna. That means that everything, every time that you do, makes it fit for sheidus kuhuna. Un als raye v'yichocha tzumino, as evidence and a proof for the above, as the oifen ha-meshicha min chof yivonis, that the style of Meshicha, like a Chof Yivonis, is verbunden mit Mekuvon und Öftung of the Meshicha, that it is tied with the intent of the Meshicha. Kahuna is Rashi Meisi Baraya. So Rashi adds a proof. But nit Kahuna is Nito the Meshicha. It's not, there's no Meshicha. Chutz Mishal Malachim Shem Kiminezet. There is Meshicha by Malachim, but over there is Kiminezet. Meshichas Malach was the Meshicha is not verbund mit Kuna. That's not associated with Kuna. Is the Meshicha not kimin Chof Yivonis? It's like not like a Chof Yivonis. Not an Eifel was his massive together Hamul Malchus Kiminezet. That brings like a type of a style, which is like a crown, which is associated with Malach. That tells us that the Meshicha that we do make, call Meshichas, is Kimin Chof Yivonis, is always associated with the idea to accomplish that sanctity. We do it, Chof Yivonis, we do it for the Kahuna, because we only do it by Meshicha, but we don't do it by Melech. Why not? Because over there it's different. Over there, it's not like a Chav Yivon. It's not associated with Kahuna. Over there, it's associated with a Nezer, with a Melech, something different. That tells us that the Mashiach that we do for the Kohen, all the Mashiachas here have to do with the idea of a Chav of Yivonis. That accomplishes and makes it the Kahuna, that makes it into a Kohen in the Kedusha. Pashtus Yesu Yesh. And even more simpler, we can say in the Pirush Rashi, the Psukim Parshasena, in the Rashi's interpretation commentary in the Psukim our verse, Vert Etchamol Dermont, he mentions several times Veg Meshichas Malach about the anointment of kings. Alpha P in the Psukim at Klal Nit Geret Veg Melech, even though the Psukim is not talking about king. So, Betamadover. So, what's the reason? The Baldas doing the parsha from Asi is Shemen HaMishcha L'Dorisechem. Since this parsha talks about making the anointment oil for generations to come. Und the Deures hat man doch dem Shemen HaMishcha euch genutzt für Mashiachas Malachim. And in the generations to come, they also use the anointing oil for anointing kings. The Riber darf man sagen, that's what we need to say, as in the Psukim da wird euch dirmas. That in the verses here, there's also a hint, Akal Ponim in Yonim, for Mashiachas Malachim, something that has to do with the anointing of kings. Und der Vater der Mont Rashi da kama Ponim wegen Mashiachas Malachim. That's why Rashi mentions here several times the Mashiach Malachim, because after all, this was a Mashiach for L'Doris, and that's what it was used for. Al derech zeh in dem Pirush Rashi. Sas Rashi zogt. Kol ha-Mashiachas kimin Chav Yivonis. Says all the Mashiachas are like Chav Yivonis, kidei zu adrois bringen. As der Eufel Mashiach is massing to Pulos ha-Mashiach, in order to express that the way we do the Mashiach, it fits what the Mashiach is accomplishing. So already he tells you at the same time, as euch Mashiachas Malachim is an Eufel Hamasim together Hamalucha, that also the anointing of kings is also fits together Hamalucha. Basically, every Mashiach fits its style, so that the Mashiach of the Kohan, that's with a Chav. The Mashiach of a king is a Nezer. This is more of a past. It's just because we're mentioning already, because we're talking, because it's the latest. The first one, Rabbi is saying it's chus, is to prove that this has a connection to the Mashiach. And that's why the only way make it as chof is by Kohen and not over there. But in the second interpretation of Parshas, Rashi is just trying to say that we have the anointing oil here in the purpose of Kohuna, it's like a chof yuvanis, and over there, the purpose of Malachim, it's like a mesa. The Yena Yudalef, Yena shall tell you with Pirush Rashi. The wine of Teddy Pirush Rashi, the Chayr is not lat. It's not so smooth. Es tak as euch am is von Loschen Yuvanis, kennen Teddy benutzt werden alle Loschen Tevis. Let it be true that a letter of the Greek language can, in the Torah, be used as an abbreviation of a Lashon Kodesh word. So the letter Chof, the anointment letter Chof, the key is represents the Kohen. Over my time it was Lashon Yuvanis when genutzt after them. But I need, why are we using up as the Greek language over here? Is the Pirush Pnimi, because the inner explanation is you do out the Pirush Pnimi for Maimer Chazal. It's known, the inner meaning of the saying of our sage's blessed memory, as the Yevonim Timu Kol Hashmanim Shebeichel. What does it mean? The Greeks, they defiled all the oils in the Heichel. What is the inner meaning of it? Hashmanim Shebeichel Zayin Meramis of Chochmah de Kedusha. The oils in the Heichel, they hint the level of Chochmah Kedusha, while Shemen is beginner's Chochmah, oil is Chochmah. On the Yevonim, which is Chochmah the Lumas and the opposing level of Chochmah, sein Menage zu Chochmah the Kedusha, they oppose Chochmah Kedusha. Sie haben reingebracht, hat Tuma Rachmona Litzlan in dem Shemen Shebeit, they, Hashem protectors brought in a defilement in the oil of the Heichel. The Greek Chochmah brought in a defilement in the Chochmah of Kedusha. Und der Bittel von Klippes Yoven is durch den Pach Shemen. And the way we nullify the clip of Yoven is through the jug of oil, which is Chosum B'Cheshomah Kohen Gadol, which is sealed with the seal of the Kohen Gadol. Der Pach Shemen, that jug of oil is the Bechina from Shemen Mishchas Kodesh. That is the anointing oil. Because this is the Darge from Kodesh. That's the level of Kodesh, was is Hecher von Chochmah, und von Welt, und von Seder Ishtalstus, which is beyond, higher than the Chochmah of the world that Seder Ishtalstus. And therefore, when you find the Pach Shemen, is nicht nur was Klippas Yoven can not say sein dem Shemen. Not only can the Klippa of Yoven not be overpowering, winning over this oil, the oil of the Shemen Mishchas Kodesh, that's higher than the Ishtalstus. Don't forget, the Shemen Mishchas Kodesh, the holy anointment oil is Menat Seyach, that destroys the clip totally. Und das ist euch der Tam, für was die Meshicha, the Shemen HaMishcha, why the oil with the Shemen HaMishcha is coming Kof Yevonis. It's like a Greek. Why are we making it Yevonis? The Rames to hint as the Shemen HaMishcha Gidem Koyach, that the anointing oil gives you the power to mevatel sein Klippes Yoven, the clip of Yoven, beat as this to the extent as nit inoris Yoven nit menaget to Kedusha. Not only would they not oppose Kedusha, but verkehrt, but on the contrary, Losh Yevonis Atzma wird genutzt. The Greek language itself is being used as Hapach Kedusha, turn to Kedusha. The Chof Yevonis, the Greek Chof is Metayed that describes and that determines that you should wait to be Meshichas. I'm Shochas and Kedusha can now to bring them to Kedusha, as I said before. Or Nochmer, and more than that, Magdim Refuah, bring the healing. HaMeshicha Lamaka, we bring the anointment before the Magzedas, Malchus, Yom and Arshah. The Greek decree, do the Mashiach before. Noch mehr, Yaft Elikim, Liyefes, and Yehei B'ol Shem, as brought down that Schreiben Loshen B'oisis Yovan, we have the special allowance that for Yefes, which is the forebearer of the Greek of Yovan, and that's going to Yehi B'ol Shem in the Torah. They can write with the level of the Greek level. Schreiben Loshen B'Oisius Yovan, is Mufchar, which is chosen Daf Zayin, B'Sifrei Kedusha from Eden. It'll be in the Holy Kedusha in Sforim. That's why there's an exception that only the Greek is kosher to be written in the Sefer Torah, and that's why it's Chof Yevonis, because this is the Mahapich to take the Yevonis and to bring it into the Sefer Torah. The Yaftelikim Liyef is Yebel Hashem, to bring it into the Sefer Kedusha. You based like the Bira, the Rechverstein, and Tam Pnimi, according to this explanation, we understand the inner reason. But what that is Kimin Chof Yevonis. To explain to Yevonis, what's Chof, Tafke? The Reis Chof is Merames of Sfiras HaKesem. It points to the level of Keser Kidua, as known, was there koyach to mevarer zayin loshen Yevonis, u'lehovchei, power to sort out the Greek language and to turn around. Nemtzach can now, from B'chinas Keser, Novi Keser, Maila Mishtalshus, which is higher than Mishtalshus. That inyan, this idea, with the Shemen Mishchas Kodesh is mevarer loshen Yevonis, that the anointing, holy anointing, well, sorts out the Greek language from Zayin Begilui Bishleimus Losalog. It will be openly, wholesome, completely in the future to come. Keser Chochma Bina de Klippa, then also the level of Keser Chochma and Bina of Klippa in the future will be sorted out. Kemerumas in Oichim them, as hinted, the fact was that Shemin HaMishcha is Gemar geworden l'Leir Sechem. So the previous quote is from the Maimer of the Mittler Rebbe, the Rebbe refers to Al Totzer Esnoyim, but also that this is the Kesach Chocham Bina will be sorted out. But Oichim them was the Shemin HaMishcha is Gemar geworden l'Leir Sechem. It was made for a generation, Koilul also Lovely, which also means in the future to come. Oilomis, or noch mehr. Even as Kulakaim lost love it. This is referencing the Rashi of the deer, Olam Lo Me'olam Mayim, the Shira. But noch mehr, even as Kulakaim lost love it, that is entirely standing in the future. Rashi on the Teuchanaim and the Shemin HaMishcha, because the contents of the idea of the anointed oil will be accomplished completely and fully the Osid Lova in the future to come. This is Mesichas Shabbos Parshas Tisa, Tov Shin Mem Aleph.